transition and let's go to the Monday night matchup in L.A. at SoFi Stadium as the Dallas Cowboys are traveling to the West Coast to take on the L.A Chargers. The Cowboys are favored by 2.5 points. It's an 8:15 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. The over-under for this matchup is 50.5. So it's Dak Prescott versus Justin Herbert. So when I look at this Cowboys-Chargers matchup, this was the other matchup that I was the most excited about in Week 6. Monday Night Football, Dak Prescott and Justin Herbert, two quarterbacks who can fling that football. If you are a betting man or woman out there, go and take the over in this game. There will be a lot of points scored in this matchup. And it's on Monday Night Football on ESPN and ABC. They're in SoFi. So this is going to be a high-scoring affair. Let's start off with the Cowboys offensively. Offensively, they are led by Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott for the season, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 1,061 passing yards. He's completing 69% of his passes. The biggest issue with the Cowboys as an overall football team, Dak Prescott cannot be trusted when the Cowboys need him the most. And in the regular season, Prescott will have some great performances. He will. There are times where Dak Prescott will put up numbers, a lot of yards, throw for 2-3 touchdowns in games. But when you need Dak Prescott the most, he will not deliver for you. And last week, even though it was only week 5, this was a matchup against the 49ers. Well-anticipated matchup. Arguably the biggest game of the season. Sunday Night Football on NBC. Cowboys at Niners. And Dak Prescott goes out there and has only 153 passing yards, 3 interceptions. His quarterback rating was 51.6. He was pathetic last week. Flat out pathetic. And I'm going to get to that Cowboys defense here in a minute because I got some things to say about them as well. But the reason why the Dallas Cowboys cannot be taken seriously as Super Bowl contenders is because Dak Prescott is their quarterback. It's just that simple. He's not the kind of quarterback who can get it done. And over the last 2 years, well, let's go three games. Over the last 3 games against the 49ers. This is including the playoffs because the 49ers had beaten the Cowboys in the playoffs in 2021 and in 2022. The last 3 games against the Niners. Dak Prescott, 3 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's completing only 58% of his passes. His passer rating is 60.3, and he's averaging 204 passing yards per game. And he averages 5.9 yards per pass attempt. So when you need Dak Prescott the most against elite competition in big moments, he folds. And this is the reason why the Cowboys are not Super Bowl contenders. They're playoff contenders. They'll make the playoffs. They're not going to win the NFC East, but they'll be a wild card team in the NFC. But this is why they can't beat teams like the 49ers or like the Philadelphia Eagles in big moments because Dak Prescott is their quarterback. And I felt bad last week for CeeDee Lamb. I really did. CeeDee Lamb last week had 4 receptions for 49 receiving yards, but he wanted the football a few times and was open, and Prescott could not get him the football. I feel bad for CeeDee Lamb sometimes because CeeDee Lamb, he deserves to have an elite quarterback like Stephon Diggs has Josh Allen, like Jamar Chase has Joe Burrow. That's what CeeDee Lamb deserves as well. And Dak Prescott is not that guy. but he can win you some regular season games and has some great performances while doing so. But I feel like for the Cowboys to be successful, they need to run the football with Tony Pollard. Last week, they only had 57 rushing yards. Now, when you go up against the Niners are going to make things tough. They are one of the best, probably the best defensive team in the NFL. The Niners when you play against the 49ers, you have to sometimes throw out the stats because the 49ers will embarrass you. Seriously. The 49ers are the best team in the NFL right now, and they will embarrass you. Look at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are 3-2 on the season. They're the number one team in the NFC North right now. Week 1, the 49ers beat the Steelers 30-7. Embarrassed the Steelers. So you got to throw out the stats with when you play the 49ers. And for the most part, the Cowboys have ran the football effectively this year. They averaged 124 rushing yards per game. That's ranked 10th. You got to run the football with Tony Pollard. You got to run the football with Tony Pollard and Deuce Vaughn as well. You got to run the football and take some pressure off of Dak. Got to take some pressure off of Dak. I also thought that in the game against the 49ers, Mike McCarthy, from a play calling standpoint, he didn't call a great game. Now remember, in the offseason, the Cowboys, they didn't blame Mike McCarthy for their shortcomings. They didn't blame Dak Prescott for their shortcomings. They blamed Kellen Moore. And Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator now with the Chargers. So we blame Kellen Moore in the offs. They didn't blame Prescott for his turnovers. They didn't blame Mike McCarthy for his bad decision-making as a head coach. They blamed Kellen Moore. So against the 49ers, there were some times where I said, what are the Cowboys doing? The play calling was archaic. There was no creativity. When I look at the Niners, they're creative. They're getting guys open. When I look at the Dolphins with Mike McDaniel, they're getting guys open in motion. You see Tyreek Hill running in motion and just running once the ball is snapped and getting open. I don't see that creativity with the Cowboys. They need that. So Mike McCarthy has to get better as a play caller. He talked about how he wanted to take over the play calling duties, and he kicked Kellen Moore out of town. Now we need to see in big games whether or not Mike McCarthy is going to be able to make the right play calls as the head coach and essentially as the offensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. We have to see it. We got to see it. Obviously, the Cowboys have CeeDee Lamb, and CeeDee Lamb, he's their best player offensively. For the season, CeeDee Lamb, 27 receptions, 358 receiving yards, only one touchdown. I also want to see in this Cowboys offense, I want to see if Michael Gallup can get back to playing at a high level. Remember, he had the injury a few years ago, and I don't feel like he's been the same since. This year, he only has 15 receptions for 180 receiving yards. Michael Gallup is supposed to be that true number 2 receiver in this Cowboys offense. Brandon Cooks, they traded for him in the offseason. He hasn't been great so far. He doesn't even have 100 yards receiving. So I expect Michael Gallup to get more opportunities in this Cowboys offense and be a dynamic duo with CeeDee Lamb. You need that. When you look at the best teams in the NFL, the Dolphins, they have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. The Bengals have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. The Buffalo Bills, they got Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. The Cowboys desperately need a player to step up in their offense as a receiver, not named CeeDee Lamb. It needs to be Michael Gallup or Brandon Cooks so they can be that second option for Dak Prescott to throw the football to. You look at the Cowboys' offensive line. You got Tyler Smith at left guard. You got Tyron Smith at left tackle. At right guard, you got Zach Martin. You got Terrence Steele as well on the right side. Their offensive line is solid. The Dallas Cowboys, their line, it's not as good as it has been in years prior, but they're still good. Zach Martin is an All-Pro. We know that Tyron Smith is also an All-Pro. This Cowboys offensive line is solid. Now, defensively, for the Chargers, I'm looking at the Chargers' defensive statistics. You look at the Chargers, they give up 434 total yards per game. That's ranked 31st in the NFL. They give up 300 passing yards per game. That's ranked dead last in the NFL. They give up 26 points per game. That's ranked 24th in the NFL. So, Brandon Staley, his signature is supposed to be defense. But I look at this Chargers defense, and statistically, they are bottom in 4 out of 5 major statistical categories defensively. They are not a good defensive team. But when you look at their personnel, you would think they would be better. You got Joey Bosa. You got Khalil Mack. At linebacker, you also have Kenneth Murray Jr. in your secondary. You got Derwin James. You got Asante Samuel as well. So I feel like from a personnel standpoint, the Chargers should be better than they are defensively. What the hell is going on in L.A. from a defensive standpoint from the Chargers? They have been awful this year. Awful. And Brandon Staley, he is on the clock. He's on the clock. He lucky the Chargers were able to win their matchup against the Vikings. Remember, that was the game in which he went for it on 4th down in his own territory and gave Kirk Cousins a chance to win that game late. They beat the Raiders by 7. I thought they should have blown out the Raiders, but they only won by 7 points, and that was a game where Jimmy Garoppolo didn't even play. So the Chargers have to get better. They have to get better. Last week against the Raiders, when they had a bad week in week 5. I'm sorry, they had a bad week in week 5. And week 4 against the Raiders with a backup quarterback. The backup quarterback is Aiden O'Connell. The Raiders had 264 total yards of offense with the backup quarterback. That's not going to get it done. Not going to get it done. So they have to be better. Now, when you look at the Chargers offense versus the Cowboys defense, the Chargers are led by Justin Herbert. For the season, Justin Herbert has 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, 1,106 passing yards. He's completing 71% of his passes. Justin Herbert is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And if he continues to play at this level, he will be a top 5 quarterback by season's end. If the Chargers make the playoffs and can make some noise in the playoffs. Herbert is playing well. And I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. The Chargers don't have a quarterback issue. They have a coaching issue in L.A. when it comes to the L.A. Chargers. You look at the Chargers offensively. They average 409 total yards per game. That's ranked 4th in the NFL. They average 269 passing yards per game. That's ranked 6th in the NFL because of Justin Herbert. And they average 28 points per game. That's ranked 7th in the NFL. So in 3 out of the 5 major categories offensively, the Chargers are top 10 in 3 of those 5 categories offensively. So Justin Herbert is an elite quarterback, and he's playing at a high level right now. He's playing at a high level. The thing with the Chargers is they're going to get back Austin Eckler this week. And you want the Chargers to run the football more with Eckler. I like Austin Eckler a lot, but he hasn't played much this year. And Joshua Kelly was his replacement. And he's played well. 57 carries, 207 rushing yards, averaging over 3.5 yards per carry. But Eckler is better than Kelly. So Eckler is going to help this Chargers offense. And they're going to need that element as the season goes along because they don't have Mike Williams anymore. Mike Williams had a season-ending injury a few weeks ago. So he's out for the year. And so now in that Chargers receiving room, you still got Keenan Allen, but you got Joshua Palmer, who has replaced Mike Williams, and you got Darius Davis as well. but they're going to need to rely on Austin Eckler. He's going to be a major X factor as the season goes along. Now, when I look at the Cowboys defense, this is Jaron Curse. He was talking about the Cowboys defense. This was after the 42-10 beatdown that took place in San Francisco last week. Jaron Curse, quote, "We are a great defense. That's what we are. We weren't crowned the best defense in the league when we had a 40-0 win over the Giants, and we're not going to be named the worst defense in the league after what happened on Sunday." Mr. Curse, sir, your Cowboys, y'all are not a great defense. You can't be a great defense because you shut down Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones. You can't be labeled or considered an elite defense because you were able to beat the Giants, Patriots, and Jets. Three teams, who have below average quarterbacks. And I'm being nice. I'm trying to be nice. Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, and Mac Jones are below average quarterbacks. They are the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. I probably would take Joshua Dobbs over Mac Jones, Daniel Jones, and Zach Wilson right now. Seriously. I feel like Joshua Dobbs has had a better season than all of those three quarterbacks I just named. So how the hell are the Cowboys still considering themselves an elite defense? You're not. You're not an elite defense. They're good. They got some elite playmakers like Micah Parsons and Trayvon Diggs when he's healthy, but they're not elite. They're good. But you know what else the Dallas Cowboys overall as a football team? They're front runners. The Dallas Cowboys are front runners as a football team. And when they play against elite competition, they fold. They fold every single time. I love Micah Parsons. I think Micah Parsons is one of the best defensive players in the NFL. But this Cowboys defense, they have feasted on inferior competition at the quarterback position and offenses that are well below average in the Giants, Jets, and Patriots. So the way Brock Purdy looked like the second coming of Joe Montana last Sunday night in San Francisco. He looked like the second coming of Joe Montana, a mixture of Joe Montana and Steve Young, the way he was performing against that Cowboys elite defense. So I have not been impressed with the Cowboys defensively. They're good. Could they be great by the end of the season? Possibly. But I have to see how they perform against elite competition. They'll get a chance this week because the Chargers, in my eyes, with Herbert, they have an elite quarterback. And they have what I would consider an elite offense. Week 9, the Cowboys, they're in Philly. We'll see how they perform against that Eagles offense. And then they had week 13, they are home against the Seahawks. Let's see how they perform against the Seahawks. 14, they're home against the Eagles again. Week 15, they are in Buffalo. This is the Cowboys I'm talking about. And then week 16, they are in Miami. We'll find out how elite that Cowboys defense is by season's end. So with all that being said, I think this is going to be a high-scoring affair, and I think it's going to be a great game between two good quarterbacks. I think Herbert could be great. Dak Prescott has maximized his potential. He's good, but not great. So with all that being said, I'm rolling with the L.A Chargers to beat the Dallas Cowboys at SoFi Stadium. I'm going Justin Herbert, 31, Dak Prescott, 24.